Record. Awesome. Well, great. Happy New Year, everybody. We're so excited to kick off our first official STEM Core Student Support Specialist professional development session for 2023. We're super excited today because as our growth sector team internally was sort of talking about, what's a great way to bring the team back and sort of to refocus and start the year off. We really went back to who we've worked with, and we were bringing back our good old friend, Lorene Fisher. For those of you who had the opportunity to participate in her session last year, I know that we had some really great feedback from it. So we wanted to do a little bit of a follow-up, but also an opportunity to sort of really focus in on mental health in general, but specifically for you all as student support specialists who are doing so much with our students and taking on so much, that we thought this would be a really fitting session to kind of bring us into the start of the spring semester. So we have just under an hour at this point, so I want to be sensitive to time. So I will throw it over to our host for today's session. Our presenter is Lorene Fisher. Welcome.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Yay. I'm excited to see some familiar faces that I remember from last time, also some new faces. So welcome, y'all. I know many of us are probably in different time zones. I see some A&T tech. Yes. What else we got? Oh, I wish I had my glasses on. I can't see everybody's schools behind you, but it is beautiful to see us connecting from different places across the country to share this space today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so y'all can follow along with me. And we'll get this going. All right, so as Cheryl already started sharing, a lot of this is coming to us related to the mental health support needs that we have. I want you to know you are definitely not alone. The experiences of burnout, high stress, and just needing some more support around mental health personally as staff members, but also in terms of how we support our students, is widespread in the education sector right now, whether nonprofit, working in the university setting, community college setting, and so on. This has been a common theme of needs. So to give you some insight as to who I am and why I'm happy to share with y'all today, my focus is really helping organizations to foster a culture of care. And that has to do with how you care for yourself, as well as how you care for the students and people that you support. So my background is actually in higher education. I just recently actually finished my role at UC Merced as a social justice education office director and transitioned into opening my own wellness studio. But my background comes from yoga, breath work, meditation, and then combining that to think about how we can really create radical healing and wellness practices. My focus was on students of color in particular, but now that has been widespread to students, staff, support specialists, and so on. So using that, I want us to think about how we can flow through today to open ourselves up to this space before I actually give you some of those tools that you can use on your own and with your students. So here are 3 things that I have seen, and I'm hoping y'all can affirm. The first one is the trends of high stress and burnout for students and staff. Second would be that there's a growing need for mental health support for people in helping professions, and a need that's not always filled, I might add. And third would be that modeling is a high impact practice. And when I say modeling, I mean role modeling, doing it first and then showing how we do it when we want to see change behavior in the people we're interacting with, students we're supporting, and so on. So I like getting interactive for anybody who remembers from the first session. So we're going to head to the chat box real quick, and 1, 2, or 3, I want you to go ahead and add one or multiple of those numbers to tell me which ones you have been seeing or can agree with today to make sure I know I'm on the right track before we keep going. 1, 2, or 3. Are you seeing the trends of high stress and burnout? Do you feel like there's an increasing need for mental health support? Or third, that modeling is one of the best high impact practices for change behavior? Okay, 1 and 2, a lot of 1. 1, 2, 3, 2 and 3, okay. 1, 2, and 3. Yes, okay. Yes, all of them. Okay, looks like we're on the right track. I love it. Well, here's what we're going to do about it. And also good because we'll be using this chat function more. I like us to get used to it a little bit. We're going to start with a check-in, a dialogue to share our experiences and what's been going on really in this past year, but especially in this fall season, moving now into spring. So as we start the spring, we do want to reflect on the fall, make sure we're making that transition meaningful. And once we create that dialogue, gather experiences, build some trust with each other, we're going to talk about how we move the temperature. And I'm going to teach you hands-on some mindfulness and breathing exercises. I want you to practice it with me so that you now have those tools to model and teach your students or whoever you might be interacting with on your campuses. And then we'll finish off with some of those take-home items. So always those things that you can work on your own, which would be how we ask the hard questions and get comfortable asking the hard questions and creating your self-care menu. So as we get started, before we hop to this discussion, I would love if you can pop in the chat. I see your names, obviously, but tell me what campus you're coming from, and then we can get started on this dialogue. And Myra, since we're going to head into dialogue, we can probably pause the recording here for a moment for those. Thank you. For those who couldn't make it, I want to make sure we give a little bit of a recap of this awesome conversation that has happened. So to the question of what are we seeing, what are we observing in terms of mental health needs, support, and communication with our students, I'm hearing a lot of students are sharing, but they don't always realize what they're sharing. So they're explaining what might be happening academically for them with this high stress concept, seeing the forest for the trees. So there's these high levels of anxiety or trying to explain, figure out future sets, future ideas, future thinking, but what's happening in the now, they're losing focus on, and maybe so much anxiety, depression, or unrelated, not diagnosed terms, right? Experiences of mental health are really happening and they don't realize it. On the other end, there's areas where students aren't really sharing. They come, they don't quite get the support they need maybe, or they're ghosting folks, they're ghosting our student staff support specialists. So it's not easy to even have the conversation because they're not open to it in the first place. There's the pieces of students that are sharing, and we have to get really clear about boundaries and making sure our role is clear to the student and us so that it doesn't become a need for therapy. We are not therapists as student support specialists. You do not have to create, self-diagnose, or create a therapy plan for your students, but it is about making sure they're connected to the resources they do need so that the conversation you're meant to have around their academics, around those transitions and support can happen in the first place. So I'm loving, there was so much more that was said. That was like the quickest recap I could give real quick. But that last piece of it was making sure that we're supporting each other, because receiving and hearing so many of these concerns, high stress needs from students, it has an impact on you all as student support specialists, as STEM core workers also. So whatever you're taking in, that's kind of our next phase of this and my next question for you. So I'm going to go back to sharing this screen just so you can see this next question, and then we'll get to our techniques in a second. But just like we asked for students, what have we noticed about our own mental health and how we show up at work based on our mental health support needs? So Myra, I'm going to ask us to stop recording again so that we can have that open space saved. All right, let's do it. So as we get into these techniques, this is the quote we are basing kind of our mindset on moving forward. A person can be like a thermometer or a thermostat. A thermometer will tell you what the temperature is. Ooh. But a thermostat will not only tell you what the temperature is, but it'll move you to the temperature you need to get to. This is from Kevin McCarthy. So as we get into techniques, the reason I bring this quote up in particular is what was already brought up. You are not the therapist to your students. That is not your job. It is not your role. So what I want to think about these techniques that I'm giving you around mental health mindfulness to be, it's about setting the temperature so that you can have the conversations that are within your role, setting that temperature and pace so that you can support yourself and support students getting into that conversation. And I know y'all are good at what you do. You wouldn't be here if you weren't, right? So then you can handle your role, have those academic conversations, talk about the transitions, but we have to get to a place where we can really set the tone to be there. So I like to think of it as three separate categories of approaches to moving the temperature. Students will come to you in all different types of ways. You may be coming into a situation feeling all different types of ways. So we're going to break it into these three general categories, with that first one being overwhelmed, not sure what to do, lacking stability. This is one of those categories where we get a lot of ghosting. There's so much going on that I just don't do anything. I retract nothing. And what is usually the best when we are experiencing, and I'm gonna take it into the we approach, because we're gonna practice this ourselves, but of course you can use these exact exercises we're gonna be doing with your students. But starting with ourselves, when we feel like we can't really grab onto anything physically or conceptually, maybe it's like, oh, like I'm supposed to do something and every 5 seconds you forget what you were about to do. There's this looming feeling of analysis paralysis going on, and you're just needing some grounding. Grounding exercises, particularly that help you engage all 5 senses and your physical body, will help you to get more present. The second category, maybe it's not overwhelmed, but just this high level of stress, future thinking, high anxiety. I'm loving that these categories match almost exactly what y'all were saying earlier, because this is what I was seeing too with my students. And there's this feeling of rushing. Everything needs to go fast, fast, fast. We want to do the opposite in this case of that fast, fast, fast nature, and help us to slow down the heart rate, the physical side, in order to calm the mind, the nervous system, with some breathing techniques. So we'll get into those in a second. And then this last category is, we were up for the other two. This one's more that low feeling, down, lacking energy. This could be feelings of depression possibly, but without diagnosing, it may just be a general sadness, or even just chronic fatigue, because we are seeing a lot of that after the pandemic as well. Chronic fatigue, trying to jump back into life in this rushed way. So we'll do some warming breath techniques and movement exercises for this one. You are going to get this whole PDF, by the way, so you will have it to go with you. But let's start with the grounding exercises. I'll talk about each of them. We'll practice one in particular all together. So with our grounding exercises, the first one is 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses. All of these grounding exercises, I will say, are made to do with like 5 minutes or less. So these are quick exercises that you can do when you get to work, at home, or show a student pretty quickly at the start of a meeting if needed. The 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses has to do with engaging all 5. So it would be 5 things you see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you taste, 1 thing you smell, things like that. You can mix it up. It does not have to be specifically 5 things you hear, 5 things you touch. You can mix it up based on like where you are. So if I'm in an environment where there's a lot of noise, maybe I start with 5 things I hear, because that's the overwhelming thing that I want to pick out. If I am in a place where maybe I'm feeling some sensory deprivation and I need to like touch things or get my body grounded, I might start with 5 things I can touch and say, okay, I'm touching my notebook, I'm touching my computer, I feel my shirt, whatever that may be. And then you just work down to make sure you engage all 5 senses. The second one is about feeling the floor. I like this picture because it's that kid-like mentality of just truly being present in whatever the physical environment is around you. So the most recommended, I would say, in mindfulness practices, so outside of the education space, people say to stomp. I realize that may not be the most conducive to your workspaces. If you just stomp around your office for a lot, somebody might have some questions. So this is why I transition it to feeling the floor. But if you are at home, if you're in an open space and you have the ability to stomp, that actual feeling of stomping creates an impact that sends up the heels all the way up the body, and it activates your nervous system in a way that helps you to be more present than when you're just sitting or lost in your thoughts. Something's not quite connecting. There's an active movement piece to feeling the floor. But if you cannot stomp in your space like this joyous little kid in the mud, then it can be literally feeling the floor. Maybe it's taking your shoes off. So socks or barefoot, you can actually feel the floor beneath you. Maybe it's just pressing toe ball heel into the ground, but it's that active feeling of, I am here, I am in this physical space right here, right now. And the more you can get the physical touch sense with the floor, the better for your grounding experience. And this last piece would be washing hands. Anything actually with water is considered a grounding exercise. So if it's taking a shower, really just focusing on the feeling of the water on your body. If it's washing your hands, if you are at work and you just need to take a step away, but focusing on the feeling of the water connection to your skin. Another piece of this though, let's say there's a student coming in and they really need some grounding and they're sitting in front of you. You don't have water necessarily. The actual motion of washing hands, because it is something so familiar to most folks, can bring back that thought or feeling of water. And you can actually guide them. Like, I want you to take 1 minute. I'm going to set a timer and pretend like you're washing your hands. Actually think about if there's soap on your hands, if there's water, where do you scrub? How do you get it off? Do you shake the water off at the end? Do you wipe it off? And have them physically practice that. It may look like a lot of movement in the moment, but it is something, because we're getting in touch with our physical body and an element of earth in some way, real water or imaginary water, it'll ground us. So we're going to go ahead and try this 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses real quick. I know sometimes it can feel a little weird trying something new while on camera. So I do want to just give you the option. If you want to turn your camera off, if it's not already, you are welcome to turn your camera off if that feels better for you. I'm going to keep mine on so I can guide you through this. But as we move through our 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 senses, I want you to get comfortable in your seat. If you need to adjust a little bit, move the cheeks, shake the shoulders, whatever it is, get comfortable. And if it feels good, we're going to start with our eyes open for our 5, and then you can close them as we go to 4, 3, 2, 1. Starting with 5 things you can see. Make a mental note and truly pick just 5. There's tons of things around you. Count them and pick 5 things you can see around you. Maybe be specific, like that red button on the phone, the blue cap to my water bottle. When you're ready, go to 4 things you can hear. 4 things you can hear. Maybe a harder one. And then into 3 things you can touch, 3 things you can feel, and actually notice what they feel like. Okay. 2 things you can smell. I know I have a candle next to me right now. 2 things you can smell. Finally, 1 thing that you can taste. 1 thing you can taste. All right, good. We're going to jump to the next one for the sake of time, but I definitely want to know how these are going for you. While we jump to that next one, just so you know, the file for this is uploading to the chat, so you should be able to pull the PDF from there, but also send it to Cheryl and Myra after. All right, to our next category, how we think of calming is through breath work. So box breathing, we actually did in one of our last sessions, but it is essentially breathing up for 4, holding or pausing your breath for 4, exhaling for 4, and then holding, pausing. It's that same. We're trying to keep those counts regular and consistent because that consistency slows down our nervous system. We call it box breathing because of that nature. Usually we use counts of 4, and you can literally just think of tracing up a box for somebody who's visual. If somebody's kinesthetic, you can actually use the hands, maybe hold a box, even a notebook, and you can trace inhaling. I'm holding my breath, Exhaling, I'm holding my breath, and do that a few times until that nervous system settles down. 4, 7, 8 is similar, as those numbers are our guide. So the 4 is your inhale, you're inhaling for 4 counts. The 7 is your hold, and the 8 is your exhale. The self-havening hug is more of a physical practice. So you would breathe regularly, but it's encouraged to breathe in the nose, out the mouth when you're doing self-havening hugs. And you're essentially giving yourself a hug, but as you exhale, you brush the hands down the arms. It's integrating the breath with that physical touch. Ooh, I got chills as I did that. I guess I needed to relax a little bit too. All right, here we are. So let's go ahead and try our self-havening hug together. This will be our trial one. You can always hug in whatever way is comfortable, but it's recommended you start high so that you take your time with your exhale going down. So let's start with an exhale, let the air out the body. Inhale to touch those shoulders. Exhale out the mouth, brush the hands down. Good, one more, we inhale. Exhale, brush it down. Good. That was just 2, but I highly recommend you take a full minute to do some of those. Those are so relaxing. And these are all terms that you can look up. These are like common terms. You can look up box breathing. You can look up 4, 7, 8 breathing, and you will find plenty of things on the internet. Or if you're sharing with a student, they can look that up for themselves. Tons of YouTube videos, things like that too. So they're not foreign concepts. Thank you, Becca. Next, last category would be getting into movement and warming breath. The breath of fire is not actually about a cat breathing out fire. It is just about rhythmic breathing. So breath of fire is closed mouth. You're inhaling and exhaling using the nose only, and it's doing it quick. So the idea is that there's no breaks in between. It sounds like hyperventilating, but the idea of it is you do it for a specific segment of time and then immediately return to a slow pace of breathing. It'll energize from within. It'll get your core working even a little bit. That diaphragmatic breathing is going to be big. And then you can settle down right after and the nerves start calming. Physically, any kind of twisting motions, big stretches, even like I like to do helicopters around the room sometimes, that releases stagnant energy and tells your body that you want to wake up a little bit. So if you're feeling low, down, these are things that can physically get you changing your body and your mind space. And that final one is stretching in opposition. I like thinking of this as the wake up stretch. You know, when you like reach your fingers and toes in opposite directions, you're just like, oh, like anything that's in opposition. It can be a leg, maybe my leg, I'm sitting in a chair and I just extend my leg, lean back into my chair. Anything that's pulling away is also going to wake up that energy and keep you going. So I had to go quickly through those techniques, but I just want you to think of these as little things you can integrate at any point in your day. To me today, as we got into our conversation, it was so much more important for us to actually share what we're experiencing. Because what I noticed right away when we were talking about students and ourselves around the experiences of mental health of late, it's that oftentimes we feel like we're alone, when really so many of us are experiencing these same concerns, same challenges around what do we do when life just keeps coming and keeps coming. I'm hoping these techniques and really at least identifying these categories, knowing that each student's going to come in a different space and that we have to meet them wherever they are at in that space, we can take on that example by modeling, hey, I'm feeling a little overwhelmed right now. It's a little hard for me to tune in. Are you feeling that too? Okay, I learned this technique. Let's go ahead and just really engage with our floor right now. It's called a grounding exercise. Maybe we play some music while we do it, but you have flip-flops on, I got sandals on. Let's take our shoes off and touch the floor. We got 2 minutes and then we'll get into our conversation. And I promise you, by the time you leave, we'll have one action step for you to take away, but we got to start by getting here now, present. Those little things don't take long, but can make a big difference in your own responsiveness to your students and in how they respond to you, and hopefully build that trust and give back. To that point that was mentioned earlier of you not being a therapist, I always think about asking these harder questions that come up if students are sharing really openly about their mental health or about big challenges in their life that may not be academic related, but they all correlate, they all have an effect on each other. we want to think about de-escalating. So with de-escalation strategies, the three main categories are body language, verbal communication, and purposeful action. So these are things we want to first bring awareness to when a student comes to us, especially if we have those surprise students, as Cinnamon was mentioning. Check their body language and their verbal communication, but similarly, human responsiveness, like the natural way, is to mimic. And we don't want to mimic if a student is in high stress. That's how we start absorbing things. So notice their body language, decide on your body language. Notice their verbal communication, decide on your verbal communication. And similarly, if they're taking actions, we want to guide them in their actions. We want to be the thermostat that moves them to the right temperature rather than letting their temperature set us. And that last piece on the bottom is what we already talked about, if you are not the therapist. So as you build trust, just be careful that you are also clear about those boundaries and role setting. So the note was there. I'm glad y'all brought it up. It was perfect. Okay, here's your take-home activity. The thing I want you to do, and maybe share with each other even, I want you to create a self-care menu. Now, what this looks like is you can quite literally get as crafty or creative as you want, or maybe it's just a simple Word document, maybe it's just a note in your notebook. But appetizers, entrees, combination plates, desserts, maybe you want to add drinks, I don't know. You can label it however you like, but this is the basic structure of it. When you are busy, or as Myra was saying, she had this system and routine of taking on this positive attitude and making sure her mindset was going right into the space, but it can still be fatiguing. It can still drain your energy, putting on that people person, in a sense, every day to serve others. So when you get time for yourself, what are your appetizers, entrees, and combo plates of self-care? Appetizers, I consider the low needs, just a taste, like maybe I have a 5-minute break. So for me, that's closing my door, taking some deep breaths. Maybe it is eating a snack. Maybe it's going for a walk. Appetizers are the things that usually they don't cost much. It's something you can integrate quickly when you need just something to give you a little boost, versus entrees are the ones that you want to be like a lot more intentional about. They all take intentionality, of course, but entrees are the bigger meals of self-care. So self-care is not always fun and dandy, right? Sometimes entrees is like, I'm paying my bills. And when I take that time to pay my bills and figure out my budget, although I don't like it in the moment, I feel better long-term. Maybe it is like, hey, I got to take a whole night off, no technology, no communication, like I'm shutting down. It's hard because I have to tell people that aren't going to like it, but I know it's going to serve me well. So entrees are those ones that take a little bit more effort. They take a little bit more work, but they have a larger impact. Combo plates is a mix of both, something fun, relaxing, feels good, with something that may be challenging, but you feel so much better when it's handled or when it's done, right? And the desserts, I consider the extras, the indulgences. And no, I don't consider therapy extra or indulgence. I don't consider a massage extra or indulgence. You need those things sometime. I'm thinking like, I'm going to take a whole vacation. I'm going to take like a retreat experience, something like that. So there's so many things in here. I see, just being able to say no can be so liberating. So the idea with this self-care menu is you make it your own. You know what works for you when you need a little love, a little care, attention, a refresh, a reset. So when you make your own self-care menu, then within your calendar, because I know y'all run by your calendars, you can literally pop something in. Nobody has to know what it is if you just write appetizer, entree within your calendar. You create those moments. Evening, night, middle of the day is a little break during your lunchtime, but put them in your calendar so that you actually have those reminders to take care of yourself. That would be my encouragement to you. So once you create your self-care menu, actually utilize it by planning and being intentional about how you can create self-care moments. I know I'm running a little over, so that is the end. Thank you so much. I love this group. I love Growth Sector and the work that y'all are doing, and I know it is hard. So I just want to encourage you, keep fighting the good fight. You are making an impact with every student you serve, even if you don't feel it all the way. And it makes an impact for our greater society when you're working to help students to live their dreams, to be their best selves. And I hope you continue to give yourself that same time and energy so that you can be your best self in this process. If y'all want to connect with me, my email is here, my Instagram's here. I would love to talk with y'all more. If there's anything else or any particular techniques on here you want some more guidance, I'm happy to do so outside of this session as well. You have the PDF. I'm going to send it to Myra and Cheryl as well so that y'all can share it. But otherwise, that's it. Thanks so much, y'all. Apologies for going a few minutes over.
Thank you.
We appreciate it. Thank you.